Hi friends, it's Deanna Williston with Our Blooming Catholic Life, and here we are on our Lenten journey. We're going to journey with a hobbit. Now, if you really want to dive into this book full force, a full study, I think Joseph Pierce, the author himself, is offering a free course through Ave Maria University. You can find that online. I think it's videos and he has discussion questions. I haven't looked into it myself because that's not what we're doing. We're doing it with a Franciscan and a Lenten focus. We're doing it a little bit differently, as we always do on this channel. We're doing it for a very specific purpose, right? And I'm going to try and do these on Tuesdays and Thursdays. If I can figure out the membership, we may be able to do some members-only live streams and where we can chat live and do them. Squeezing in the time is what's difficult for me. I normally do these videos on the fly, but we'll try and figure it out. If nothing else, we'll have them air on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I hope you've gotten your book because we're not going to study the book like word for word, right? We're using it as a launching point. And if you can't remember why we're doing this, it's because The Hobbit is a pilgrimage of grace. Every Lent should be a pilgrimage of grace, right? We know that we can't do it on our own. If we could give up gossiping, if I could give up snacks, whatever it is, we'd be doing those things already. But we all know the Bible tells us some devils can only be driven out with fasting. And so we are going to have some fasting, whatever that looks like for you is between like you and your priest and your doctor. I'm not getting involved in that. But whatever that looks like for you. And remember to try and increase your prayer. Yeah, the time you would normally spend scrolling or gossiping or whatever, try and incorporate some prayer, even if it's just a quick little, I can't remember the other word, ejaculatory prayer. Just a little one like, Jesus, my God, and my all. If you just need to say that to yourself in those moments, that's fine. But we're going to increase our prayer, incorporate it, weave it more into our lives, and we're going to do some more fasting and some charitable works. And great if you can find a way for these all to work together. Now we're here with our Hobbit, and it's telling us that we want to grow in wisdom and virtue. And how do we do that? Reminding us that every pilgrimage is an adventure, and that includes Lent. And it says here, this is so cozy, the Hobbit develops the habit of virtue and grows in sanctity. And we think of our Hobbit friend, Bilbo. We join him. He's in his cozy. It is cozy in that Hobbit hole. If you've ever seen the movie or read the books, I have them right over there. We could grab them in a minute if we need to. But he's in the coziest of little Hobbit holes, right? Nice and warm. He's smoking his pipe. He's probably on his second or third breakfasts, enjoying himself mightily. Maybe has some good music on in the background. He's quite cozy and comfy. And that's where we find ourselves at the beginning of almost every Lent. We're cozy and comfortable. Time for a challenge, right? A challenge. We want to grow in virtue and sanctity. And fasting is one of the things that helps us do that. We cut back, right? The Hobbit is eating all these glorious foods all the time. We're going to cut back on that, right? We're going to control. The purpose of that is to get control of our body and our senses and to become detached from some things. Now, the author again wants us to know that throughout the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, they talk about luck. There seems to be a lot of good luck and bad luck, but it's really us working with divine providence, us working with the will of God, or not working with the will of God. So we're going to have to look at that. How do you want to look at that? When we talk about divine providence, it's how God is working in your life. That's language they use in spiritual direction all the time. How is God working in your life this week? And how is God working in your life in that situation? And if you don't know how to answer that, I know my parish is doing something called life mapping right now. It can get a little cheesy. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to share. If you want to do this, I'll try and link an article, but you basically take a journal and you can do just a timeline of your life. You can make it circular. You can draw it out however you want, but normally they encourage you to draw something. So you can have a circle for family, a circle for friends, whatever. So you can have little circles. You can draw whatever you want. But then you're probably going to want to number them somehow. You may look through, so it's major events, both good and bad, from your life on this timeline. And you may want to mark them as consolation or desolation. Were they natural? Consolation, desolation, spiritual desolation and consolation. You can mark those. You can use those advanced terms, but you totally don't have to. You can number them or whatever situation you want, however you want to mark them. And why I'm saying to mark them, you can use it by date, whatever you have. Then pick them. It doesn't have to be in linear order. Pick an event, use that notation, or you can just name it on the top of a journal page, and then describe the event. Describe how you thought God was moving in your life and whether there was a resolution there. Did he come to you with graces and consolation and you just felt great? You knew you'd made the right decision. Or like maybe it was a time when you were greatly sick and you had, so that's natural desolation. You're already feeling low. And what did you do? Did you double down on prayer and then get a consolation? Did you double down on prayer and you still struggled? Did you not do any more prayer? Did you back off of prayer because you were sick, you didn't have the energy, and then you started to get depressed? Like, what did this look like for you? And then you turned on God and said, God, why me? Like, what did you do? How did God respond? It's the back and forth. You're looking at your relationship with God and how he's moving in your life and how he's trying to get you to grow. How is that shepherd occasionally tapping you with the cane, occasionally giving you a carrot? What's going on? How is God moving in your life? And that's divine providence. It says that the book the book is also a moral commentary on the words of Christ from Matthew 6. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So we know the Hobbit, his cozy life, was a good bit of his treasure. And that is where his heart was, in his home. He himself in his home, by himself. Not necessarily with others, not for the glory of God. It was about him, wasn't it? And again, we can all fall into that trap to lesser or greater degree at any given time. And that's why it's a mirror of every man's journey in these books. I love this on page 4. It tells us that life is charged with meaning and purpose, and is at the service of the final goal and purpose of every human life, which is its being united with the divine life of God in heaven. This being so, every life should be a quest to achieve the goal of heaven through a growth in virtue, thereby attaining the power through grace to overcome the monsters and demons which seek to prevent the achievement of this paramount goal. So many times when we enter Lent, again, we think the goal is to get to Easter and then we get a big feast and we appreciate it more. That's not the goal. The goal is to be united with Christ in heaven one day. Be up there with the Holy Trinity. See the face of God. Live eternal glory. And so how are we going to do that? We need to remember again on page 5, there is no triumph of the will without supernatural assistance of grace. We're not going to temper our wills without grace. We talked about luck already. Oh, there was a really great quote from Gandalf. He was saying it to Pippin, that often does hatred hurt itself. And we know that. Somebody who is wounded acts out of that wound a lot. Hatred hurts itself. So Tolkien shows us the mystical balance that exists between promptings of grace or of demonic temptation and the response to the will to such promptings and temptations. So if you look at Ignatius's rules, whether you want to do that or not, Saint Ignatius of Loyola. So when you're kind of in the beginning and you're heavy into vice, the devil is the one giving you sweet things because he wants you to stay there. He doesn't want you to challenge that. He's giving you sweet things and your conscience is kind of biting at you, right? And later on, as you grow, as you do things in virtue, God may be giving you some consolations as you're turning your will to his. And then the demon may start striking you. So it kind of flip-flops. So you can look at that as you look at that life map of your life. Let's see. And the book again reminds us grace is always available to those who seek it and ask for it. Beautiful, beautiful, right? The fallenness of nature means that man's natural tendency is towards concupiscence and its destructive consequences. If we don't ask for help, we are bound to fall. It is in this choice, rooted in the gift and responsibility of free will, that the struggle with evil is won or lost. The will must willingly cooperate with grace, or in its failure to do so, must inevitably fall into evil. Can we cooperate with grace. So we don't just ask for grace, but when we're given it, sometimes it can be overwhelming, right? Are you willing to cooperate with it? You can't just ask for it and then walk away when you get it. I can't do. Have you ever had that? You've had a phenomenal opportunity fall in your lap and it's overwhelming and you walk away. So we start at the beginning. We ask for the grace to be able to cooperate with grace, whatever that looks like. Or is it Saint Teresa of Calcutta who said things like, you ask for the grace to be able to ask for the grace, to be able to ask for the grace, to be able to ask for the grace. However many times you have to ladder that on, ask for the grace. Interestingly, it also talks about the ring, right? The ring to rule them all. The ring's malevolent power over the one who carries it is directly connected to the degree of attachment that the bearer has towards it. The more detached the bearer is from possession, the less he is possessed by it. And that is what poverty of spirit is all about. It doesn't mean that you have to be dirt poor. It means that if you wake up tomorrow and your neighbor's house burns down, you're probably going to be running over and saying, hey, come to my house. Stay in my room. I'm going to fix it up for you. I'll sleep in the guest room. We'll do what we can until we get you ready. Here's some furniture. Here's some food. And you don't give to them out of your excess. You're giving them out of your heart. Why? Because I'm detached from these things. Sure, this bed is comfy, but how much more comfy would it be to my neighbor who just lost their house, right? So go ahead and try and think of these things. How detached can I be? You don't have to give them up in the moment. But if they disappeared tomorrow, would you be sitting and crying and shaking your fist at God? Or would you pick yourself up? Thank God that you're still here and that you can still have another day to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. Beautiful. It does also say that although Bilbo only values his possessions as a means to an end and not as an end in themselves, as the dragon did, he just found them as an end. The fact that they are necessary, or so he thinks, to the attainment of creature comfort that he craves, bestows upon them a power over their possessor, which is akin to the possession of him. Now remember, we just talked about that like last week with St. Francis of Assisi, right? Where even if there was a plate in the house that he felt he needed, he's like, sometimes the complacency that would set in, well, I have like an extra plate. I'm rich. But it would interfere with his detachment. So you have to, again, look at yourself. Again, that's we looked at that last week in, are they up here? Are they at the Chunky Monkeys? Oh, it's right here. St. Francis of Assisi, the early documents. So it's volume 1. And we were looking at that, his detachment from things. He was just so upset that there was even this plate in the house. It bothered him that day because he felt it. He needed it. It was like a comfort. And then, no, you don't need it, right? Sorry, I'm getting that, probably oversimplifying that. You feel that they're necessary, and it's not. You don't need a plate, do you? But there's other things, like people tended to give St. Francis, here, have this little lamb, have this little bird. And he would try and find them good homes, but he had no real attachment to them. Even the animals that he would rescue that were going to the slaughter. There's a story about him rescuing a little lamb that was going to the slaughter. He didn't rescue it because he loved lambs or he loved fluffy things. He was like, oh, it's so fluffy. No, it's because it reminded him of Christ, the perfect sacrifice, being led to the slaughter for our sins. And that broke his heart. And so he paid for the lamb and he had the lamb, but eventually he had to get, he didn't want a lamb. It's just because it reminded him of Christ. He couldn't bear to see it taken to slaughter. So he had to find it a happy home where it lived happily ever after. You have to be detached from your things. Okay, let's jump into chapter 2. It talks about an unexpected parting. Let's see here. It talks about where did hobbits come from? Where did the author find them? And it talks about that a little bit, where he may have found them in books of fairies and things to start with. And it reminds us that only God creates in the sense of making something out of nothing, whereas artists and authors merely subcreate, making things from other things that already exist. That is a great humility in realizing that I don't create anything new, right? But I may recreate something, have my own little twist on it. Like we're discussing this book. I know there's courses on this book. Plenty of people have them. You can go to them. But we're putting our own little twist on them. We're not creating it from scratch ourselves. The book would like us to remind us again that Bilbo Baggins bears a remarkable resemblance to each of us, and that he's a creature of comfort dedicated to the creature comforts. In Christian terms, Bilbo Baggins is dedicated to the easy life and would find the prospect of taking up his cross and following the heroic path of self-sacrifice utterly anathema. It is the inconvenience or suffering which serves as a wake-up call and a call to action. For us today, that is the season of Lent. We must forsake the world and the worldly in favor of the pearl of great price. Now the book wants to talk a little bit about magic. What is magic in these books? There's 3 types. There's the ordinary everyday sort, which is like in natural, out in the animals. It only appears to be magic to those who have lost touch with the dignity of nature and their place with it. Like flowers popping up. Where did that come from? You could stand outside and look at stars and be really connected to your food and nature and be like, oh, the crow is singing its love song. It must be spring. How'd that happen? That ordinary sort of magic. 2, it's technology to do things that are not possible without it. In historical terms, here it talks a lot about alchemists. And early alchemists were suffering from dragon sickness. While their method was scientific, it was unwholesome and unhealthy. They were doing science for the sake of gaining riches. No. See here. Oh, it says it may be clever. It may be magical. But is it wise? Is it good? For Tolkien, most of the fruits of modern technology have proved harmful to humanity and harmful to the harmony of the natural ordering of things. And a lot of people talk about this, like with cell phones and internet, right? There are a lot of dangers involved with it. Is it clever? Sure. Is it wise? Is it good? These are things we can ask ourselves. Again, we can look at that timeline of our lives and say, were we clever? Was this choice wise? Was it a good choice? The third kind of magic is a miracle. It says it's the way you can bring dead words to life. So when Bilbo greeted Gandalf by saying good morning, it's just something you casually say. But then there was Gandalf going, wait, what do you mean? Do you wish me a good morning? Or mean that it is a good morning whether I want it or not? Or that you feel good this morning? Or that it is a morning to be good on? And Bilbo had to stop and think. He had to give flesh to the words. He had to chew on them. He had to meditate on them. What do I mean? And I'm brought to mind here, oh, it's not right here, our little book, Meditations Before Mass. Stop and think about the parts of the Mass, the things that we say, all of our prayers. Lent is a great time to do this. Think about the things that we say that we have memorized. What do they mean? Now, Gandalf does warn us that one solitary phrase can feed a multitude of thoughts. So you have to be careful. We know in the woke world where suddenly all the meanings of words changed. That's not what we're saying. We're saying to be careful in our selection of words and to explain ourselves better. Be more thorough, not to be superficial. It's not telling us to change all our words. I love the fact, he says here, the fact that adventures are uncomfortable is the very reason for their usefulness. And that Thorne's depiction of dragons in Middle-earth seems uncannily like the description of certain types of people, which all of us know. Those who know the price of everything and value of nothing. Could meditate on that. Dragons are not merely hungry, they are wicked. They desire the defilement of the pure and undefiled, the destruction of the virgin. Their devouring is a deflowerling. Wow. We need to look at that. We are in a battle against the wickedness we encounter in our everyday lives. We all face our daily dragons, and we must all defend ourselves from them and hopefully slay them. The sobering reality is we must all either fight the dragons that we encounter in life or become dragons ourselves. There's no comfortable spot to rest in between. Chapter 3 is about trusting in luck. And it's interesting to note that Gandalf uses the natural negativity of trolls to destroy them. As creatures of darkness, they lack charity and are prone to quarrel. The book then talks about the influence of both Belloc and Chesterton, so you can go and research those a little bit if you'd like to. But isn't that interesting? Some people will enter into that. They're naturally negative, and sometimes you can use that just to get away from them, just to run away as fast as you can. That can be a defense. You may need that sometimes. And you don't even have to run away. They'll do it themselves. You just give them, yeah, we won't use that expression, sorry. But use that negativity. Let them have it. They're already negative. They're already going down that path. You can leave them to it. That is a curious thought in your life. How does that's great in a fantasy adventure. How does that work in your life? Usually, like say there's a series of text messages and you can see the nastiness. There's a bunch of people on this thread. You can see the nastiness. You don't necessarily need to call them out on it because it's there for everyone to see. It's so plain. You don't need to enter into that negativity. They're spiraling on their own. If you want to try and step in and stop the spiraling, that's one thing, but calling them out and entering into that with them is probably not going to be your best helpful method. On page 24, this is very interesting. He talks about how the elves are different in The Hobbit to The Lord of the Rings. They sound quite silly in their little song. It's like a little fa-la-la. And they seem silly and they have a funny little accent. He thinks it's just not... It seems to me that Joseph Pierce is saying he develops them better as he goes along. But these are the average elves, but they're not the high elves that we meet in the second book. But I kind of see them also as elves as holy fools. Like St. Francis was one. He was very mystical, but he could also be quite silly sometimes. So I never thought of that before, but I love that imagery. Sometimes you do seem very pious and holy, and sometimes you seem downright silly. But there is joy of the Lord. It's not just foolishness for foolishness' sake. There's the joy of the Lord. Let's see here. It talks about a wealth of knowledge, which is one thing, but also about great wisdom and a virtuous disposition. These are things we can think about. Like when they read the moon letters on the ancient map, or when that little bird lets them know that there's an opening. That's where the secret button is to get the rock wall to open or whatever. And to me, what I read into that is that's almost like Catholic tradition. Without tradition of the apostles and the constant teaching of the church, things in the Bible can seem a little confusing. Some of it, like, what is with all those lists of lineage? What does that even mean? If we didn't have the tradition of the church, the teachings that have been handed down, the living oral history that's been handed down over generations and generations, we wouldn't understand these things. So it almost seems like Elrond. The elves, some of the high elves, seem to have held on to that knowledge. They have the tradition, capital T, tradition. It talks about there's not luck that is chance, but it's grace, and it shows us the meaning and purpose of our lives. And I'll just end here on page 29. It says, if the finding of the keyhole will take a miracle, they had better hope for the best, which is to hope for a miracle. They need faithful hearts and to head eastward. And that is where we are on our journey, friends, with hopeful hearts. Friends, may God bless you and keep you, and make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. And we pray that your Lenten journey is fruitful. God bless you, friends.